how do you become a lifestyle entrepreneur? Or really, how do you start on the path that leads you to becoming a full-time entrepreneur? That's a question I've always struggled with and asked myself throughout my entire adult life, and it's what I want to tackle in today's video. My name is Jesse Krieger. I'm the author of Lifestyle Entrepreneur, now founder and publisher for Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Press. But 10 years before I ever put pen to paper and started writing a book about this subject, I was exploring it firsthand and really trying to carve my own path in life and in business. And so really, how it all got started. I mean, when I've read business biographies and stories about successful people, I was always more interested in the very, very early stages, right? The nascent beginnings of their idea. Not so much on, what they did and how they led companies after establishing themselves and finding some degree of success. But I always thought if I could put myself into the mindset of what it's like to be Steve Jobs tinkering in a garage with Steve Wozniak putting together the core components for the first personal computer, or Thomas Edison tinkering in a lab thousands of times before finally coming up with a model of a light bulb that worked. It's after that, sort of unclear stage where you're trying a bunch of ideas and seeing what works and ultimately keeping what does and discarding what doesn't, that you stumble across a mix that works and can be leveraged, and that's what turns into a business. But we get ahead of ourselves. So I want to share a little bit of my own background and what were the actual steps that I took that led me into becoming an entrepreneur, now having founded or co-founded well over 6 companies and selling 2 of them, and more or less being an entrepreneur my whole adult life. Well, it didn't start that way. I mean, at 13, 14 years old, I fell in love with music. My father gave me a Fender Stratocaster, and before you knew it, I was ditching school, learning Jimi Hendrix songs, playing in bands, basically completely consumed with music and guitar in particular, and just exploring it to the greatest extent that I could. So after high school, I had the opportunity to go to Los Angeles Music Academy, which was a 12-month program, basically all music, all the time, and 80% of the student body was international. So really, for the first time, I was getting exposed to people from different cultures, different walks of life, and it sparked the idea that I wanted to see more of the world. I wanted to understand what was going on in a global context. And so after that experience of 12 months of just learning and playing music nonstop, I had the opportunity to go and travel Europe with 5 of my closest friends for about 2 months. And I decided to pull the trigger. I wanted to have that type of an experience. And so away we went. And I brought a backpacking guitar with me. We were traveling around from Italy to France and many places in between, really just reveling in the diversity and the different ways of life, meeting people with different cultures and backgrounds, and seeing how rich this, experience of life can be. All the while playing music, writing, but still sort of in a mindset where I was on vacation, right? And soon it would end, and then we'd go home, and then we'd be back to normal life. But something happened towards the end of that trip. It was the day before taking a train back to Paris. We were in Nice, France, and sort of going out and celebrating our last night before essentially starting the journey home. And we went out, we were drinking, we were in a bar, a lot of fun, reminiscing on the memories we had. Around 1:32 in the morning, we head outside, and I don't remember all of the details around it, but we quickly found ourselves sort of cornered in an alley, and there was a bunch of sort of drunk guys that were being aggressive, and before you knew it, one of them threw a punch, and then there was really no option, and got in what ended up being pretty much the biggest fight of my life. Ultimately got my butt kicked, but fortunately nobody got seriously hurt. I remember getting back to the hostel, looking at myself in the mirror, sort of bruised, a little bit bloodied, and thinking, is this how it ends? Is this how 2 months of traveling and living free winds down, and going home beaten and battered and bruised? And the idea sprung into my mind of don't go home. This isn't it. You could continue living like this indefinitely. I slept on it, and the next day, walking to the train station, I had pretty much made up my mind, but I told my friends for the first time. They're like, yeah, whatever, you're gonna come home, you're not gonna stay here. We get to the train station, get our tickets, get on board. I'm still standing on the platform, and they're saying, come on, the train's about to go, come on. And I was like, nope, I'm staying. And I don't think they believed me until the train started to move and pick up speed, and ultimately, whoosh, it was gone. And now I was standing on a platform alone, looking out at a field and some train tracks. And at that moment, I realized, wow, you can make a decision and your life can change. But ultimately, I didn't take that perspective until I reflected on it. At that time, I was thinking, look, I'm going to go to Vienna, Austria, where I'd met another American musician who had been supporting himself for the better part of a year, playing guitar on the street and playing guitar in bars and clubs, earning enough money to travel constantly and continue this experience that I'd had. So we met back up in Vienna and started playing out as a duo, playing in bars and clubs, playing out in the touristed parts of Vienna during the summer. And living in a student dorm, we were paying less than $200 a month, and ultimately became friends with the guy in charge who let us set up a recording studio in our basement. And so what quickly began to happen was, we'd record music and try new ideas in the studio, and then go down to the supermarket and buy like 100 beers for 25 cents each, push them back up to the hostel in a shopping cart, and then sell them at parties that we'd throw for people that came, and the student dorm had turned into a hostel when it was getting close to summertime. So I quickly found that we could make money by, providing a fun atmosphere and providing, discounted beers. We'd sell them for $1, but we bought them for $0.25. So I could see how much we were making as we were throwing our parties. And then once we gave them a few beers, we'd sell them some of our CDs and music that we produced in the basement studio. And so that was the very, very beginning of, what eventually grew into a record label and having a band, having the #1 independent rock song in the US, having 9 songs on MTV, music on hundreds of radio stations. I just want you to grasp that the origin of that, the very beginning, started in a student dorm in Vienna, throwing parties and selling beers for $1. And what happened from there? Of course, this was fun, and I got to travel and experience more. I was studying German and really wrapping my mind around the diversity that's available in life overall. And we had an opportunity to go into what was called the School of Audio Engineering. From midnight to 6 a.m., we could go and record professional quality music, and I was starting to love the production side of music. So after living in Austria for close to a year, I decided to move to Nashville, Tennessee, and actually attend the School of Audio Engineering. And I dove into this with the same passion that I applied towards, recording in our basement studio, playing out in bars and clubs, now learning the behind the glass aspect of music production. And it was there that I met who became my first business partner and my bandmate, a guy named Jake Harsh. And we were both in school together. We quickly moved in together and had a house that we converted into a studio. We were writing, recording, playing music 10, 12, maybe even 14 hours a day. As we were working on our own music and working with other artists, eventually there was so much going on that we needed some way to administer this. We needed some way to actually have a structure. And it was at that moment that we decided to incorporate what became my first actual business. So at age 21, signed the paperwork, filed the docs, and formed Tabula Rasa Records, which means clean slate. Because from a clean slate or a blank slate, you can create anything. And so that was our perspective. And that was actually the beginning of my journey of entrepreneurship. I came into it, as you can see, through the filter of my passion of music, travel, exploration, and adding the business layer, the structure, to be a support, to bolster those passions. I didn't have the verbiage for it at the time, but that was the beginning of how I became a lifestyle entrepreneur. In the next video, I'll elaborate out from that point, how did I really build my first business and how did I ultimately become basically a lifelong entrepreneur, now helping other people through publishing and books and trainings and live events, as well as videos like these and just ways to connect and share and hopefully inspire you to take steps towards your entrepreneurial and lifestyle goals and dreams. So I'll see you in the next video, and thanks very much. To your success, and talk soon.